To our talk today. It is aimed to be a guide for parents specifically, but yeah, I will be talking about lots of different players in the child's world around education. So, as always, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional landowners of where we are meeting today. I'm on Wurundjeri land, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Sovereignty has never been ceded in this country, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I hold very dearly the wisdom of our First Nations people when I'm talking about any of these relational skills, as you know, they are such beautiful wisdom holders on kinship care. So I hold that with me tonight, and hopefully I can honor that with my work. So a little bit about me. My name is Felicity Odgers. Most people call me Flick, and I'm a senior play therapist at Playroom Therapy. Um, the reason why I kind of chose this topic tonight is something that I'm quite passionate about, as in my former career, I was a primary school teacher for about 10 years, and I worked in very diverse schools. Mainly in remote Aboriginal communities. And I'm also a parent of two children. One's in kinder and one's in school. So I feel like I have a bit of understanding about all of the different elements that come down to making really strong relationships. I've been in the teacher camp. I'm now in the parent camp. And I also, as my role as a play therapist, see my position as being a bit of a bridge with some relational skills. So often I work with parents a lot about how do we advocate for kids in schools? How do we, bridge that care? So I thought that it would be great to share some of my own understandings. As I feel that I'm not an expert. I don't really identify with that word, but I do bring with me some professional knowledge. So hopefully I can pass that on to you tonight. So what to expect from this talk? So tonight we're basically looking at the why this even matters. Why do we need to have strong relationships with kids? What does the research say about that? I'm going to look at some theory as well, which can kind of create a bit of a roadmap or a motivation for doing this work. But we are going to be spending most of our time on the practical stuff, the how to build these relationships, and navigating some common challenges, both from the parenting lens and the teacher lens. Um, I really acknowledge that in talking about working with schools and supporting kids across this environment, things can come up. We've all got experience being a child in school. We've all got experience navigating the school system. And often it can be quite a sensitive area to reflect upon, and feelings naturally come up. One thing that I do want to frame up is tonight, it's about being constructive. At no point do I want to diminish the work of teachers or schools or degrade any of that work. I was a teacher, so I really understand that world and those just what it takes really to run a class. Yeah, so if feelings or if anything that I say triggers something for you to maybe want to chat about, and we will leave it to the end. And if it is of, a very specific thing, like something to do with your child or to protect the identity of you and your child, we might flag some additional supports. But if you're wondering about general things, I would love to be able to get to those questions at the end. Okay, so let's jump in with why do relationships matter? So we can use attachment theory to kind of understand relationships, and also some elements of neuroscience to really kind of Yeah, give us some juice as to what we're doing here with these relationships. So at the core of all relationship work is attachment theory. Um, you can give me an indication of if you've heard of attachment theory. Yeah, brilliant. It's definitely something that's in, the ecosystem from the last 10 years. Lots of parenting advice is based on attachment theory for good reason. Um, and it's because attachment it seeks to explain how the relationship with caregivers forms a blueprint for kids to use throughout their whole lifespan. So the way that we relate to our kids when they're babies and, right through our parenting journey really has some really strong impacts on the way that they form relationships with peers and other adults as they grow. Um, the job of a good enough parent, and uh, I think it's really important to say this is good enough. We're not perfect parents and we can't always respond in, textbook ways. But the role of a good enough parent is to become a secure base for children. So this model here is called the circle of security, and it essentially highlights the two main roles of a secure attachment figure. So, what we want to be is like the safe hands for children. And one of our functions is to delight in children as they go out and explore in the world and to welcome children back in when they are needing care and nurturance. So, children are going out and coming back in all sorts of ways from the moment they are born, essentially. They're doing this a lot. And so, I guess the circle of security to me reminds me of, dropping your kid off at school and then welcoming them back after school. It's a very kind of obvious way that framework would work. But it's also important to remember that when kids are school age, they're in the stage of multiple attachments. So they're no longer just needing you in their world, they're needing other people to be able to step in and be that safe haven or that secure base when we're not there. So the school day is an incredibly long time for children to go without their attachment figure. And so they are going to be needing other adults that can do this work in delighting in them going out and welcoming them back in. So, one way that this happens, this process of transferring care from parents to teachers, is through the process of neuroception. Um, so, neuroception is the process that children and all people have where they are constantly scanning for danger and threat. So this can happen unconsciously, so they're not, logically thinking like, where is the danger here? Children do this with their nervous systems, and they, of course, need to feel safe in order to attach to a teacher or another adult. Now, the way that the role of the parent works here is that children like realistically borrow the nervous system of their parents. So when they're scanning your responses to teachers, they're checking, does mum or dad think this person's safe? If they're seeming confident and relaxed, it's a bit more of a green light for children to be safe enough to connect with them. Um, yeah, so attachment form informed teachers are teachers that also understand this process and will have systems in place to help with children going out on the circle and exploring, and also be able to attune to kids and know when it's time to, do that nurturance and welcoming them back in. So essentially, attachment informed teachers emulate caregivers when they are responsive, calm, predictable, um, all of those sort of lovely things. So why do we need this? Well, the research shows that children who are connected to teachers form um, they have better outcomes with education. They take greater risks, so they're able to go out a lot easier. They cope better socially, and they also recover better from distress, which makes sense because they're having their emotional needs met. Um, yeah, so it's very like closely linked to regulation. Okay, so here is how we can do it. Now, we know why it's important. Ways that we can support attachment. So we need to be the bridge between home and school. So as I said, children borrow the nervous systems of their parents. So how we speak and how we actually feel is important. Our words can say like, "Oh, yes, I'm happy to see you," but your child will know if you're not being true. They have a felt sense, and that can lead to a bit of stress if it's not matching up. So it's important to be genuine in your warmth for the teacher. Help your child feel seen by the teacher. Um, so making a little bridge between your child and the teacher by gently introducing them. This could look like sharing, their interests or some information that will help them in the classroom. It's really important here when you do speak about your child to the teacher that you let the child know that you have done this, because this is a really helpful way of letting the child relax into the relationship because they think, oh, I don't need to explain myself to the teacher. It's not up to me to tell the teacher that this is how I am in certain situations. It's almost like allowing the kid to just be themselves and the adults to be the communicators. So of course, normalizing relationships take time. Um, this is great for parents and kids to remember. I think, once we've gone from having a year with a really trusted teacher and then finding ourselves in a new situation every year, sometimes there's a bit of that inertia where kids can feel like, oh, I should be, just as in love and comfortable with this teacher as the last teacher because, this is what I should be doing. So just helping your child understand, like it takes time. It's okay for it to be a bit tricky at first. Help your child reach out to the teacher. So I know personally, often I hear myself saying, did you tell the teacher about that? Or maybe you could ask the teacher for help next time when that happens. And I have to stop myself and realize that there's kind of steps before kids can do that. Um, so usually to get a child to that point where they can advocate for themselves, there needs to be little steps of just shared information giving. So helping your child share something that they find interesting or a skill they have can help build that skill up to advocacy. It could look like saying something like, "Oh, that's a pretty cool drawing. Maybe you could put it in your bag and show your teacher tomorrow." Or I think your teacher would really love to hear how basketball went tonight, something like that. The next one is about staying secure, which is very tricky to do when problems arise, and we will cover this later down the track. But staying secure, the secure base for your child, and remembering that that there's room for multiple attachments and you don't need to compete. There's obviously shared goals, but very different roles when it comes to parents and teachers. Um, so, yeah, when your child is struggling with something in school, recognizing the feeling that naturally comes up where you might want to withdraw them from that environment or like pull them closer to you, like pull them into your safe haven. Um, but this can sometimes make the relationship process harder for them with the teacher. So being a bridge could look like validating their emotions, but also conveying confidence. So you could say something like, "Oh, that sounds really hard," or "That would have been really upsetting." Your teacher's a safe person to talk to about that, like ensuring that they see that there's avenues for them. Repairing quickly is an important one as well when, naturally things arise. Um, and I guess when things do arise, one of the biggest factors to consider is to not vent in front of your child, because that will obviously have negative impacts on how the child sees the teacher. Um, and highlight moments of connection instead. So, this takes a little bit of tuning in, but you might say things like, "Hey, I noticed your teacher was smiling at you at assembly today. That's pretty cute." Or like, cool. Or something like, "Oh, your teacher remembered that it was your birthday. That's wonderful." Making those links for them so that it's a conscious thing. Um, okay. So here we have a bit of neuroscience. Just checking in, is that all sort of sitting okay with you so far? Beautiful. Um, so the reason why attachment is so important is because essentially it affects how safe children feel. Um, and how safe children feel directly impacts how much they can function and learn at school. So obviously the goal is for kids to learn and be engaged in their school environment. So what we are looking at is the functions of the different areas of the brain. So our brain is broken up into like three main groups. Um, the lower brain or the brainstem, the midbrain or the limbic system, and the cortex. So um, essentially, we want children to be firing in the cortex so that they are learning, remembering, solving problems, collaborating, all of those really higher order thinking processes. So, in order to get them there, we need to understand that the lower areas of the brain need to be satisfied or they need to have their conditions met before they can get to that thinking brain. So, the first question is the be all and end all, and it comes from the brainstem. The brainstem needs to have safety. So the brainstem is responsible for the neuroception and scanning for danger. Um, and it is essentially asking, am I safe here? So when a child is in their classroom and they're sensing for safety, if it is safe, then that's great. They get like the green light into the next area of the brain. If it's not safe, essentially the other areas of the brain are not going to come online. They're going to be in a stress response to try and seek safety. But if they are safe, then the next question is, do I belong? Or am I accepted? So this is the relational zone. So this is where all the feelings are. It's also where memories are stored. So the limbic system always wants to know, am I liked here? Am I cared for? So this is where the relationship comes in as well. If this part of the brain is satisfied too, and only then will kids get into their cortex and think, okay, well, I'm ready to learn. So with this in mind, it's really easy to understand that a stressed child or a child that doesn't feel connected to a person is going to really struggle to learn or, have ease in that learning environment. So this is why it's so important to have really solid relationships. Another buzzword is the co-regulation. So we hear a lot about co-regulation these days, and it is actually really important. It's really important to understand what co-regulation is, and how it happens. So children regulate through relationships. It's pretty difficult for a child to regulate just self-regulation is not a thing. They learn that through thousands and thousands of experiences of having another adult regulate with them. So co-regulation is the process where we need others to feel regulated. It's the sharing of our calm instead of joining at their chaos. It creates emotional literacy and safety within the relationship when they experience this. So, parent-teacher relationships are really key to the way a child can experience co-regulation with a teacher. Um, And it's twofold. So if a teacher understands how a child is through the lens of their parent, they are far more likely to be able to attune to their needs and step in with those regulations, strategies when needed. They're able to see things better, essentially. And similarly, when a parent understands how a child is at school and how they've been responded to by a teacher, they are more likely to be able to respond in consistent ways as well at home to meet their child with greater compassion and understanding for how they've experienced their school day. Um, yeah, so this essentially creates a powerful loop between schools and home. Um, where a child can essentially experience continuity or like being held in both spaces. Um, so it's very important. We love our children to be very regulated at school for learning. Um, and also another couple of things to consider of why we're doing this work. So children internalize the relationship um, between adults. So, as I sort of alluded to before, they don't just listen to what you're saying, they experience your felt sense as well. So, when a child sees respectful communication and warmth, they learn that relationships can feel safe even when there are problems. But when there is mistrust or conflict, this can arise, in children in the way of like shame. They could feel like, oh, there's something that I've done that's created these, or I'm the reason why people can't get along. Um, it could also drive children to create like loyalty bonds. Like they might think, oh, I have to side with my parents, or I have to pick sides, which creates a lot of stress. For kids. And, what we know about kids that are stressed is often they will act out in, externalizing behaviors that will be picked up with at school. Um, yeah, another thing is the strong parent-teacher relationship reduces misinterpretations of behavior. Um, so I found this like very interesting to think about because when we are able to share information really freely with teachers, they are much more likely to be able to see the child's behavior in front of them as communication rather than, in their haste or, label it as like, oh, that child's just, um, doing this for these reasons or attention seeking or whatever those like labels are that can come with difficult behaviors. So I think it's really important, especially for a child's felt sense of safety and understanding, if we can reduce that and have, more of an ability to see children as having needs rather than, behaving in a certain way intentionally. Um, yeah, and also the last point is that it protects the child's sense of self, which is really lovely. When there's a strong relationship between parents and teachers, a child learns that their home identity and their school identity doesn't need to be split. They're allowed to be, themselves across the context, and they don't have to change, how they speak or behave to kind of suit the context that they're in. Um, yeah. So those are the reasons why we are doing this. So just before I jump into the practicalities of this, is that sitting with you? That was a very quick kind of tour of neuroscience and attachment theory, but I just wanted to give you a sense of, this is kind of key to having good outcomes for kids at school. So yeah. So the how of it is what do we do? How are we actually going to create this lovely environment where we're feeling ease and we're having flow and the kids are feeling, not always regulated, but feeling supported in their environment. So a helpful framework is to think of our role to connect, to prepare and partner with schools. So we want to build relationships early by connecting. We want to be really prepared and understand a lot of like the technical things about our child, understanding the context of the school, understanding how things work, and yeah, how to meet the goals and partner with them to meet those goals. So managing communication essentially. So the building blocks of collaboration are as such. So the first thing we do, and I think that this is something that I come back to a lot, is that it starts with mindset, and just kind of checking in and reflecting on where your mindset is in terms of how you're feeling about the teachers or the school. Um, so obviously the most productive mindset is to remember that we are all on the same team, that we have shared goals, um, and to assume good intent. Um, this is, in therapeutic terms, we call this having unconditional positive regard, and it's a skill that we use in order to maintain relationships. It doesn't mean that there's never times where you feel negatively in any way, or there's never problems. But if we can keep our mindset generally focused on, that overarching, we're on the same team, it can help create a container for those feelings, and so that we can better deal with them when they arise. So structuring communication is really key. So this looks like when you at the start of your relationship with a teacher or a school, it's really important to ask the teacher, like, what is the best way to communicate with you? The school will obviously have policies. There may be different communication channels, like, a little book that goes home, or an app, or some teachers like email. Some teachers like me really love it when people just come and see me after school, but not all teachers like that. So it's really important to sort of check in and say, what is it that you prefer? How do we set this up so that it is easeful? Um, so yeah, I guess like the key messages with structuring communication is to make sure that messages are kept like on target, like with a specific point in mind, that they're brief and that they're with a friendly tone, obviously. Um, Avoid contacting teachers only when there's a problem. I think that it's really lovely, and, in roles where they might not get a lot of feedback, and a lot of their work goes kind of unrecognized, getting positive feedback, or even just little check-ins like, oh, my child was so happy after that excursion. It really does make a difference to teachers, and their well-being, and their drive to have these strong connections with kids. Um, yeah, so understand what is important to share and how. So this is coming back to being, the leader of sharing really helpful insights that teachers wouldn't otherwise know. So things like what motivates your child, what triggers stress or anxiety for your child, interests, strengths, strategies for regulation. They might have like sensory preferences that would be helpful to share. Yeah, essentially giving them tools that they need so that in the moment they can be those safe hands. It's important to be consistent, not constant. So this comes down to also having trust in teachers to listen and follow through with the goals. Regular check-ins that are scheduled are more likely to have, be effective than frequent reactive messages. So I guess that's helpful to remember. This also comes with like respecting the boundaries of like where the role of the teacher ends, and having, realistic expectations about response times and workload, things like that happen. for teachers that are juggling. Okay, so the parent-teacher interviews are, as old as time and something we've all experienced even as kids, but it is like a very structured and I guess formal way that these relationships build. So understanding what to do in parent-teacher interviews is, I guess, a great idea to be able to support kids. So I'm just going to take you through like a few things of what to do before, during, and after a parent-teacher interview. Um, and, you know, oftentimes teachers are at the forefront of leading these meetings, but not always. Um, so I guess it's important to also have some understanding and some skills. So before the meeting is really about kind of centering yourself and preparing what the purpose is or what you're hoping to achieve from this. So having two or three priorities is probably all that you will be able to frame up in that short time. So specific questions could be around like, where is my child doing well and what is an area of focus, and how we can support this. That's obviously a flow of questions. Um, it's also important to provide relevant updates of changes at home, health or emotional factors or concerns that your child has shared. It is key here to make sure that when you're sharing information about your child, that at all times you are honoring their right for privacy. So yeah, if you have things to share with your teacher that could be hard for your child to hear, it would maybe not be a place to do that in a parent-teacher interview with their child present, but perhaps alluding, say, hey, there's some things that I want to share with you. Can we make another time for that meeting to happen, just to preserve, I guess, that felt sense of safety that's so important for kids. During the meeting, it's important to stay curious. So I guess parent-teacher interviews can be a sticking point for feelings. And for me, I feel like it's because we have all experienced parent-teacher interviews as a kid, and we all bring these experiences forward as adults. So our past experiences affect the way that we see dynamics, especially if we had very authoritarian teachers as kids, or we had, challenges ourselves. So recognizing when feelings are coming up for us in a parent-teacher interview and how to reflect on those and think, is this something that belongs, with me? Or is this actually something that I need to, look at for my child? So being able to kind of separate what's yours is a helpful way of staying regulated. When things do come up in parent-teacher interviews, a very tricky thing to do, but an advisable thing to do, is to avoid jumping in to explain or justify, but just try to listen, and use the time to regulate yourself. And then also formulate some clarifying questions. So if a feeling has come up, you can it's the time to kind of be curious and explore more. So you can say like, can you give me an example of that? What does that look like when he's in class? Or you could reframe something that doesn't feel very that doesn't feel comfortable for you. So if something comes up and you're feeling like the need to advocate for your child, you can reframe by saying, "Oh, hey, like I really want to understand this better. Is there a way that you can explain this in a different way?" Just so you can stay present and hear the message, and keep that mindset of like, how are we going to do this shared goal work? Focus on actionable steps. So keep on target because you're very limited time in parent-teacher interviews. So essentially, at the end of an interview, you want to leave the meeting understanding what's happening at school and how you can support that at home. and what success will look like. Yeah, after the meeting, it's time for, organizing follow-up, doing the things that you said you were going to do at home. Um, and also, yeah, summarizing the agreed actions. It could also be nice to send a follow-up message to the teacher, just thanking them for the information that they shared, or yeah, just acknowledging that, that meeting had meaning. Um, yeah, it's also important to make sure you check back in, in time after those meetings have occurred. Now, care team meetings. So, care team meetings is something that's happening more and more frequently, and certainly something that comes up in my role as a therapist. Um, and I guess it is important to kind of have a chat about, because care team meetings sort of sit a little bit like an extra layer on top of parent-teacher interviews. So, care team meetings are essentially meetings that are around learning support, maybe like an individual learning plan or behavior support, or a well-being care team meeting, and they usually include the system around the child. So they usually include the parents, the teacher, any support staff, leadership or well-being is also often included, and the child's team, if they have like allied health team or professionals. It's a really great opportunity to get the professionals together to talk about consistent ways or consistent goals for the child. So obviously, with all of those people involved in care team meetings, it can be difficult to schedule. So because of that, it's important to go into them informed and organized. So that might look like having reports already done, collated, notes or like observations in the classroom, examples of, what their needs are, and have 2 or 3 goals already in your mind. Yeah. So another thing that comes up with care team meetings often in my work is acknowledging that often schools lead these meetings. So especially like well-being or leadership in the schools are very used to running these sorts of meetings. And sometimes the parent doesn't really know where their role is in the meeting. And allowing parents to step up into a bit of the leadership role in care team meetings is really important and key. Like that would lead to some great results, because obviously the parent is the expert of the child, and has their insights are key. But also, parents don't have training in running meetings or, coordinating multidisciplinary teams. So a lot of the time it's very overwhelming, and they don't know like what they can advocate for. They obviously don't want to cause any ruptures in this team dynamic. So it can be really tricky for parents to know how they can speak up and collaborate and lead with their knowledge. Um, yeah. So one way they can do that is using like we language. So how can we support this child together? And if something doesn't feel right in care team meetings, instead of pushing back immediately, they can ask for like, what are the alternatives? What has worked with similar students? What processes are already in place? Yeah, drawing the knowledge of the team together. So kind of acting as a little bit of a leader or a container in that space. Ask for clarity on support plans is key. Um, Again, with no experience doing care team meetings or having this, you know, dynamic in their professional lives, it's hard to know what they can ask for. So parents should leave knowing what supports are provided and how often, who is responsible for them, how the process will be measured, and how the team will be linked in together. If is there going to be an email chain? Is one person going to write the minutes and send them out? Who's going to be responsible for the follow-up? Things like that. Um, and when it will be reviewed. So it's important to keep, I guess, keep the conversation in a practical sense. So, thinking about like what is it that's realistic? Like, what can we actually focus on in this, say term or month, that is a realistic goal that aligns with the values of the school and also the values for home and the needs of the child. Avoid overwhelming plans or things that have got too many actions. You can also, again, take notes or ask for them to be recorded if it's on Zoom, or yeah, usually somebody takes the role of minute taker and will send those out. But just having that clear at the forefront of the meeting. Okay, so some common pitfalls, I guess, or some things to avoid, just briefly. So, you know, thinking about the relationship with the teacher, it's helpful to um, avoid only contacting when things go wrong. So I've touched on that earlier. Um, but also it's important to yeah, keep communication consistent and focused and I guess like that friendly tone is really helpful. Um, Avoid comparing your child to other children and also avoid comparing teachers to other teachers. Um, because I guess this can, well, it's kind of unhelpful, but it also can set up a very defensive dynamic. Um, yeah. Going into meetings unprepared is unhelpful and also expecting immediate fixes or having unrealistic timeframes is a pitfall. The biggest pitfall I think that can happen with the dynamics between parents and teachers is the I guess the tendency to take things personally, which is a very human response, um, and something that I guess is the crux of the sticking point. So when that happens, I would love it for parents and teachers to both experience self-compassion and understanding that, of course, um, when we're dealing with little children who are like our heart and souls, of course, we're going to have invested feelings, and it's only natural that we feel defensive or we feel protective of that relationship or that little person. And to just recognize when that comes up in you, having self-compassion and gently shifting your mindset back to the positive regard, the assuming good intent, and having the shared we're all in this together mindset. So navigating challenges. We're up to our third um, sort of heading. Um, so obviously all relationships come with challenges. Um, and it's not about, I guess, minimizing the challenges of the other person in the system, but acknowledging that there's challenges for parents and there's also challenges for teachers. So in the next two slides, I'm going to frame up some common challenges that parents experience when they're navigating school systems, and also provide a understanding of the school context or the perceptions of teachers as well. Okay, so here are some common challenges for parents. And something that I hear a lot is are these things for parents coming and needing some support in this area. So and the main one is feeling intimidated or unsure about what to say or what is okay to share or what, yeah, like what is, outside of that. So, what's behind that is the perception that teachers are experts, which they of course are. but it's a fear of being judged in that space. So um, parents might be worried that they don't know the right language, or that they're missing a key element. Um, so one thing that helps is to recognize that you don't need a teaching degree to advocate for your child. Um, yeah. Another thing to think about, and something that I touched on before, is the past experiences with the education system. Um, and feeling like I only hear from the school when there's something wrong. So this can happen because schools have got so many different elements to manage and so many different pressures that yeah, that it can feel like that it's hard to create that checking in with with so many time pressures. So holding on to that knowledge that teachers are doing their best to communicate effectively and efficiently, and obviously wanting to work together when problems do arise. Um, Another thing that can happen is, parents they say, I don't want to be that parent. I don't want to bring this up to the school because I don't want to be seen as making trouble, or, asking for things that are outside reasonable. And that's a very common experience. Um, it can come from a fear of damaging the relationship and being uncertain about the rights or options. What can be helpful is staying calm and curious, and acknowledging that these conversations are tricky. You can go in there and say, "Look, I really feel uncomfortable with bringing this up to you. I want to make sure that that our relationship is still positive, and here are some concerns." I was just quickly going through some points about the feelings of parents can sometimes be around feeling intimidated or unsure. And that also comes with a tendency to say things like, I don't want to be that parent that's always up at the school. I don't want to be seen as difficult or niggling, or all of those negative things. The fear of being perceived is very present in parents. And a helpful way of kind of managing that is realizing that you don't have to know the jargon of teaching. You don't have to know the core of how to teach in order to engage with teachers, in order to advocate for your child. And yeah, and often it's time, it helps to just be really genuine about that and be like, hey, I feel kind of uncomfortable bringing this to you. I don't want this to impact the way that we work together. And allowing that to be seen, not having to step into and pretend that you're confident, or that you're totally certain with all of these processes. It's very realistic that parents will feel overwhelmed in this new system. There's always changes happening at school. There's always shifting sands, so it can be overwhelming, and naming that up is helpful in building that bridge. Um, the fear of making things worse can also rise, like wondering if you make it known that these challenge, that these concerns are coming home, or that your child's complaining about this, or these conflicts are happening, worrying that your child may be at risk of being labeled in a certain way, or that they're going to have more focus put on them, or that they'll have some negative outcomes in some way. So that's like a concern around stigma, I guess. And what can help is focusing conversations around support, like how are we bringing it back to that shared focus. Yeah, remembering that understanding leads to support, basically. Parents can sometimes feel like they don't know how to support at home. This can be really tricky as kids kind of go through the years and work starts to get harder, and there's more kind of demands on academics and bridging that gap and like understanding how children learn, sometimes it can be very overwhelming for parents to know what's my role at home. So having that ability to clearly define those roles can be helpful. Another challenge is when we're not really getting an accurate picture of what's happening at school. Sometimes this is younger kids. They might be saying, "Oh, everything's fine," or like nothing happened, but your attunement to your child is saying something else. They might be having lots of after school restraint collapse, or they could be experiencing school can't, which are all indicators that there's a nervous system response happening, that there's like a key element that needs addressing at school. And it can be tricky when we don't know what that is because, the child may not have the ability to even understand and verbalize that themselves. So being able to sit in that uncertainty and kind of wonder with teachers is key. Like having that, it's almost like I don't know what's happening, but these are the factors that are leading me to believe that there's some stress here. So, let's work this out together in collaboration. And lastly, parents sometimes report um, feeling like they are not being heard by teachers or meetings that don't seem to help. So here's where a little bit of like that helpless feeling comes in for parents and caregivers. Um, yeah, I think that this is what's behind it could be things like very busy school environments, like juggling lots of needs in the classroom, communication breakdowns. So sometimes when communication styles differ, there could be some misunderstandings. Like sometimes you may think that you've communicated your position and the teacher's got a different idea. So it's hard to kind of get back on the same page. So what helps is like going through really structured channels, like giving due time to whatever it is that you're wanting to express and making sure that you're being very clear and specific and following up just so that it's like reiterating that this is an important factor for you. Yeah, so I think that also with meetings that don't seem to help, a lot of the time that can be because of that overwhelm. Like I'm not really even sure where to start. I don't know what the goal should be for my child. And that feeling of helpless kind of bleeds into being able to structure those contexts for your child. Um, so what might help build this bridge is understanding the school context and the perspective of the teachers. So as like we're framing up that that this relationship is so important and that obviously teachers are humans as well and they bring to their job so much expertise and so much I'm going to say like drive. Like teachers are incredible in their ability to hold multiple realities for different students. So understanding how your child fits into this greater context is so important. So in preparation for this, I kind of reached out to my teachers network and said, what is it that you want parents to know? Yeah, what's your message to help these relationships bloom, which is the shared goal? And some things that came up were that it's really important for teachers that parents have very good understanding of what their child's needs are, what if there's diagnoses at play, how that plays out in different contexts. Having past experiences with pediatricians or other educators or allied health, teachers want those reports and they want They want that information because it frames up how they're going to be able to relate to that child. If there's complex needs, consider timing, like when we're going to bridge these conversations. I know personally, I found like when I was beginning to teach, often like something will be handed at the start of the day, like, oh, and by the way, this very specific information that I needed, but I couldn't respond because I was about to teach. So understanding what's the best time for this message, and scheduling longer meetings so that it can really be drilled down into. Um, Consider work hours. So at the start, we mentioned that teachers have different preferences for communication. But I think that it's, a general rule that to respect teachers outside of work hours time. And if we are, emailing teachers after hours, that there is an understanding or a system in place that ensures that teachers are not checking their emails until their work time, so that you can expect, you know, I know as a parent, like when my child goes to bed, that's the only time I get to kind of like reconnect with the services. But I need it to be in place that then it wouldn't be responded to at that time. The teachers can leave that. Um, yeah, understanding the school context can be around like knowing the difference between kinder and school. Like often there's different expectations for parent involvement at kinder, and then that shifts at school and again as children get into the upper years. So understanding like how much involvement parents, schools would love parents to be involved in, and how you can step into those roles is good. Understanding the wider systems of the school, like is there a well-being team? Is there a well-being program that they follow? Is there an education support staff in the classroom? If there is, they may, how does that person work? Are they tagged to one child that may come with funding, or are they working across the classroom to support more generally? Um, yeah, really having the nuts and bolts of this. Understanding what's already in place at schools is really important, what the processes are involved. Your role at home. So, um, understanding, especially with the early years, things like toileting, being able to tie your shoes, self-care like putting on jumpers, drinking when you need to. These are things that can fall in the home camp and things that can be practiced at home in order to support the running of the school so that teachers don't get I guess, like bogged down in little kind of practical things and are able to do the bulk of the work, which is supporting regulation and teaching. Um, yeah, and lastly, having compassion for teachers and understanding that they are juggling a multitude of stresses, including class sizes, shifts in the curriculum, demands about reporting, and, policies that they need to follow working within the system. And understanding that kindness goes a long way. Um, okay, just check the time. Okay. Um, Lastly, it's really important when we are talking about relationships that we think about the process of rupture and repair. So, no relationship is perfect. And also, attachment theory teaches us that it shouldn't be perfect because it's in the rupturing that happens that strengthens bonds. So, if we never had any problems in our relationships, we would never have the chance to repair. And it's that process that is key to having really good relationships. So, there are moments where parents feel misunderstood or a teacher gets it wrong, or communication breakdowns. These can all constitute a rupture. Ruptures can also happen when a child comes home upset or they've relayed a story of something that's happened at school, and naturally feelings have arisen in the parent around what we can do to rectify this situation. Um, so Yeah, children build trust not because nothing goes wrong, but because they see relationships can be mended. So it's really important that if and when, because it's going to happen, ruptures happen with school, um, that repair is initiated quickly so that things don't, I guess, get swept aside or allowed to fester. But that also children can be, witness to or modeling that relationships can survive hard things, and that the parents in their life have got this, like that they're working together to ensure that they're safe and that it doesn't fall to them. Um, so it's really important to own your responsibility to repair if that is where you're leading, and not allow your child to step into that role of, communicating with the teacher, like, oh, mum said this, or, being cutting out the child as the middle person is important. Um, so when structure isn't repaired, children can feel confused or unsafe. Their stress response is activated, and they can worry that tensions can cross from school to home. Yeah, and as I said, when repair does happen, the child learns that they're safe and that their nervous system can settle. Um, it doesn't have to be a big formal thing. It can just be a simple like, oh, I think we got our wires crossed there. I think that was a little misunderstanding that happened in that meeting. Do you have time to talk about it now to clarify things? Um, yeah, owning your part without blame, refocusing on the child's needs is important. Um, yeah, and in doing so, the child learns that they don't have to hold on to the stress.